Hello, and welcome to episode 26 of Sarastro's Marvel Crisis Protocol painting series. In this video, I'll be painting the Sentinels and Sentinel Prime from Atomic Mass Games' Marvel Crisis Protocol. Because of the size and numbers of figures involved, I've chosen to use some pretty quick and simple techniques to get my Sentinels ready for the table using the following steps. After assembly, I'm going to begin by applying a black and white value sketch, introducing plenty of texture with some sponge as I go. I'll then provide the main tones using contrast colours to allow the underlying values to show through. We can then finish the Sentinels off by painting the lights and providing plenty of battle damage and weathering. As usual, you'll find chapter links to help you navigate the video. Let's begin. Because of the wide range of limb and posing possibilities, assembly of the models is a lot of fun, and I loved having the option to use some battle-damaged variants for the head and torso of the Sentinel Prime. I decided to use some white tack to allow me to explore a range of ideas before gluing the models together, and for my two Sentinel MK4s, I chose to have them looking down, which is where I imagine most of their targets will be positioned. After priming in black, I gave the figures a broad zenithal highlight using Vallejo's Cold Grey. I then used some pure white, mainly just to brighten up the lights on the chest, hands and back. Next I'm using some black and white to create a rough grayscale on the palette. And I'm now using a sponge to strengthen the values and to begin creating a nicely weathered texture. I'm starting with pure black and dabbing this into the most shadowed areas, but also adding texture to the broad areas of midtone. Next I'm using increasingly light grey tones to build up the values for the areas of highlight. This is now pure white. This is a nice easy way to create a strong sense of volume with plenty of texture. We can also provide a white dry brush to sharpen some of the details and edges. I'm also hitting the base with this. Here I'm just filling in a few distracting gaps with some Mod Podge. And I'm finishing the underpainting off with a few manual highlights using pure white. This is pretty optional however, as we'll be adding some final edge highlights later on. With the underpainting complete, let's now add some colour. I'm going to begin by painting all of the inner metallic areas using a roughly equal mix of Gryph-Charger Grey and Basilicanum Grey. You could use pretty much any dark bluish black tone for this, and on reflection, I think some thinned black Templar would also be a good choice. For the blue armour plating, I'm using an equal mix of Aethermatic Blue and Frostheart for the lighter areas, which I'm going to blend into some Ultramarines Blue for the shadows. I also like to have some contrast medium on hand in case I want to do any thinning as I go. So this is the Aethermatic Blue and Frostheart mix, followed with the Ultramarines Blue for the area of shadow. And I'm now blending the tones with a damp brush. I'm carrying on round the rest of the model in the same way, loosely following the pattern of light and shade with my 2 shades of blue. For this palm, where the plasma blast will be coming out, I've thinned the tone down with contrast medium to make it easier for me to achieve a little object source lighting later on. For the magenta areas, I'm using Volupus Pink, thinned down with medium for the highlights, blended into a little Shyish Purple for the shadows. I'm trying the Volupus Pink out in varying degrees of concentration to see what looks best, and we can always add additional layers later if need be. Here you can see me adding the Shyish Purple. For the faces, I'm simply using Guilliman Flesh. And here I'm strengthening some of the shadows on the areas of magenta. I've also decided to glaze a little of the purple tone into some of the blue armour to create a bit more tonal unity. And I'm now just adding some slightly more concentrated patches of shadow for the feet. With that done, we're ready to add some finishing touches. I'm going to begin by mixing a pale off-white using black, white and Prussian blue, and I'm using this to add plenty of edge highlights and chipping to the metalwork. I've also decided to go a little darker for some of these inner areas. I'm now using both the sponge and the brush to add some chipped weathering and scratches. Here I'm lightening up the areas where I'm planning to add some objects or lighting in a moment. And I'm also adding some highlights to the inner metalwork along the way. I'm now adding some dark lining using the Tamiya black panel liner. For these fine grooves, we just need to touch the surface and the paint then flows effortlessly into the recesses. If we hit an area where it's not wanted, we can just give it a quick wipe. I'm not exactly sure what this material is, but I'm painting it using red leather mixed with a touch of black, then highlighted with the addition of some Tenere Yellow. For all of the glowing elements, I'm first providing a fresh undercoat of pure white. You could then paint over them using whatever fluorescent tones you like. I'm trying out these orange pigments by Hera models. This is the orange light pigment, which I'm mixing with some matte varnish. I'm applying this reasonably thinned to allow me to build the saturation up if necessary. It's actually tricky to pick up on camera, but I found these pigments produce a really brilliant tone. Alternatively, I'm also very fond of the Vallejo fluorescent red. This is the slightly darker orange pigment, which I'm just brushing lightly into the recesses to create a little variation. I'm now adding a few glowing orange spots to the edges of the damaged metalwork on the torso. For the object source lighting on the hands, I'm mixing some of the light orange into some white paint, building up the intensity to see how things look. And here I'm using some of the darker orange for the more outlying areas. I also chose to incorporate some orange into some of these edge highlights. I then decided that the lighting on the palm was a bit much, so here I'm toning things down with some thinned Ultramarines Blue. I'm now painting the bases using mainly graphite for the pavement tone, along with some black and browns for the rubble. And red leather was my choice for the brickwork. I then did some overbrushing and dry brushing, alternated with some shading, which included some Nuln Oil and Agrax Earthshade. And as usual, I like to sprinkle on some Urban Scatter by Jarvis. Next I'm going to add some dusty weathering, and I've chosen walnut and orange leather for this. I'm applying this quite freely in thin layers, focusing initially on the feet and legs. I really liked how the orange tones complement the blue armour plating, so I took the liberty of adding various touches of the orange leather elsewhere on the model. This is one of those finishing touches that is really simple to do, yet adds a lot in terms of visual interest and character. Some of these orange tones could also be interpreted as object source lighting, of course. Here I'm mixing some vanilla white with some of the Volupus Pink and adding a few highlights to their head. I'm now just adding my last few touches of black lining, highlights and fine scratches. And this completes the Sentinels. Thank you so much for joining me. I do hope you've enjoyed the episode. As always, you can find full paint and product lists in the video description, along with links to all of the places I can be found on social media, as well as the various music platforms. My sincerest thanks, as always, go to my dear patrons for funding this work. I simply couldn't do it without them. Join me again soon as we continue painting miniatures from Marvel Crisis Protocol. Happy painting!